Hello, everyone, and welcome to Smart Talks, powered by GenieCast, with support from the Nitrous Effect and the Emerson Leadership Institute and the Shape It School of Business at St. Louis University. I'm John Lanius, the Chief Operating Officer here at GenieCast, and today our Smart Talk is entitled Traditional Mastery in the Modern Age with William Reed, coming to us from Yamanashi, Japan, where it's 8 a.m. tomorrow. William is from the future.
Back to the future, yeah.
Welcome to Smart Talks, William. How are you?
Oh, well, thank you, John. I'm feeling great. It's great to be on. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, so I'm curious, what is the weather like today in Japan?
Okay, well, it's actually not that different from St. Louis because I think we're at the same latitude, but we're entering the spring season, and Japanese like to celebrate with haiku. So I've composed a haiku. It's actually a Matsuo Basho haiku. And what it says is spring. The spring is almost a ready panorama, moon and plum blossoms.
Will you say that in Nihongo?
Okay. 春もやや、景色整う月と梅。
Domo arigato. I love it. I love it. All right. So thank you for sharing that. And just so everyone's clear, that's your calligraphy as well,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Fantastic. All right. So I'm actually going to read your bio. The reason why is because I don't want to miss anything. So William Reed has extensive experience with samurai code and culture, ranging from popular culture to storytelling to actual practice. He's been studying the Japanese language as well as Aikido, Shodo, which is calligraphy, for over 50 years, and currently has an 8th Dan, meaning black belt, in Aikido, the way of harmonizing energy, a 10th Dan in Shodo, again, calligraphy, and a 2nd Dan in Iaido, which is the art of drawing the sword. William has been in more than a dozen samurai documentaries and national television broadcasts as commentator and navigator at historical sites, and his calligraphy, which you just saw, was used for the title page of these programs, which is a great honor. His participation as navigator for 8 different NHK journeys in Japan has given him direct experience in samurai history, culture, and the ninja. He has been interviewed about samurai culture on more than a dozen podcasts and nationally broadcast radio programs. William was a regular commentator on Yamanashi television for 5 years, often demonstrating or visiting sites with samurai themes. He is a professor of Japanese arts and culture at the International College of Liberal Arts, ICLA, where he teaches samurai code and culture, calligraphy, and kanji culture, Aikido, Nanba, which we're going to talk about, which is samurai walking, and career design. William formed a club at ICLA to build handmade samurai armor from scratch. He is the director of the Yamanashi Association for the Study of Samurai Signatures and serves on the Japan Sports Agency Committee for Budo Tourism. Again, William, quite an amazing background. Welcome again.
Thank you. When I hear all that, I wonder how did I find the time?
I love
But
it.
they're all connected, so one leads to the other quite nicely.
Absolutely. I often say that myself. Like if you study one or many things deep enough, they all connect, right?
Yeah.
Love that. All right. So we already know that there's numerous questions that have already come in. Thank you so much for those. If you do have a question, we will be doing Q&A. So we've set aside time for Q&A later in the program. So if you think of a question as the conversation goes on, send it via the Zoom chat and I'll read it to William. If you'd like the opportunity to actually turn on your mic and camera to ask a question live, simply click the reactions button and then raise the hand button and my producer will assist you. So, okay, William, so for those who are watching in St. Louis, they may not know that you're originally from St. Louis. So why don't you talk a little bit about your origins in St. Louis and then how you ended up in Japan to create quite the long list of accolades.
Yes. I grew up in St. Louis and I was there until college. But actually something happened to me way back in 1963 when I was 11 years old. I was walking home from school and suddenly my friend and I were surrounded by these bullies. And they thinking back, they didn't hurt us, but they certainly scared us. It was a psychological trauma because we realized there was absolutely nothing we could do to defend ourselves. So the next day I went to the local dime store or drugstore, which had paperback books on the little rings, you could turn them around, and it was mostly comic books and things like that. But I found one book, and I still have it. It's called The Power of Aikido.
Mm.
And it had these little illustrations in here, and it said that you could do this with multiple attackers. I said, that's for me. And but I didn't have a teacher or a dojo, a place to practice. And so I practiced on my younger brothers. Why not? I think I traumatized them. But then later, when I was in college, I found that book again in the college bookstores. Oh, I remember that book. And next to it was this book, Aikido in Daily Life, which was by Koichi Tohei, the man who became my teacher for many years. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm going to Japan. They're living masters. I want to study this. So that's how I ended up making the big jump across the pond.
So so on LinkedIn, I promised folks that if they tuned in, that they would have a very powerful conversation around leadership that they could take for themselves. And so for those who don't know, again, you're mentioning Aikido, and it's 3 Japanese words meaning the way of harmonizing energy. As kind of a first question, how would you take Aikido and apply it to leadership today?
Great question. Well, Aikido is based on redirecting and leading the opponent's force. So it doesn't really matter how strong they are unless you collide with it. I often tell my students when they're forcing their way or trying to block or go against the movements that is coming against them. I said, well, do you drive a car? Yeah. Have you ever driven on a highway? Yeah. Have you ever tried to enter on the exit lane? No, you don't want to do that, right? All the car that's going against the traffic, you just wouldn't want to do that. Well, in Aikido, you develop the sense for not going against the grain. And in fact, you want to be there even ahead of the game so that you can be there first and redirect them this way. So you don't collide, and therefore it is leadership. And then you create a resolution of the conflict.
Excellent.
I might also say that leaders need to be self-possessed. They need to have self-mastery. If you can't, if you're not a master of your own mind and body, then how are you going to be expected to lead others?
Mm-hmm. So what's interesting about this conversation for me is that, William, just the short time that we've gotten to know each other and the depth and the breadth of your experience and your mastery, and I know that you'll kind of push that away in a very Japanese way, which you should. It's been very beneficial for me, and it was one of those things where I was like, gosh, I want to bring your teachings to a smart talk. You've become a genie now, which means that businesses and people can actually hire you to come in and have these conversations that make a difference, that relate to leadership, that relate to effectiveness, that relate to everything that we want today. And so, there's a lot of concepts that may be foreign to some people today. And so I'm going to be listening for that and kind of bringing things back, because since you're in the culture, it's like there's that expression of the 3 great mysteries, water to the fish, air to the bird, and himself to the person, right? Yeah. So let's connect leadership to Zen. And first of all, what is Zen, and what attracted you to Zen and the Japanese culture more than what you've already said?
Okay. Well, Zen is a word meaning meditation. Many people today talk about mindfulness, and I think although Zen has periodically taken on popularity, even in the 30s, and again in the 60s when I was growing up, there were entire bookshelves all about Zen. It was Zen Buddhism. It's a form of Buddhism, and now you not only do not find the bookshelves and the books on Zen, but even the bookstores are gone. But the books were really popular in the 60s. And then, of course, Steve Jobs was really big on Zen. And even now, Google and Microsoft, they all do mindfulness training. And that all comes originally from Zen. Well, one of the books that influenced me was this one, Zen and Japanese Culture by Daisetsu Suzuki. And it's quite a thick book. and it's got some beautiful illustrations, which of course include a lot of calligraphy. That's the way they wrote in those days, and Miyamoto Musashi. And the topics, I'll just read from the table of contents. What is Zen? Zen in the study of Confucianism, Zen in the samurai, Zen in swordsmanship, Zen in haiku, Zen in the art of tea, love of nature. And to me, this was not only a fascinating form of spiritualism, but what I liked about it was you had to actually, the mind was something you could show, you could see, and you could show. You couldn't fake it. You couldn't just have a long beard and say, you're the guru and, you have to listen, follow me, right? You had to prove, and that was the way you'd also polish your own understanding through your artwork. And this might be a tea ceremony or a work of calligraphy or building a Zen garden or something. But there's a physical component through which which reflects the inner state. And I thought that was really interesting. And plus the idea that this was something that could be found throughout Japanese culture and is such a huge influence, even people who don't really think about Zen so much. And the fact that there are living masters today that you can go and study with in any of those fields.
Mm-hmm. So at the beginning of this interview, you spoke in Japanese. You are fluent in Japanese. Actually, I took your TEDx talk and shared it with one of my other teams so that I said, there may be a lot of reading here, but, becoming bilingual, how has that changed the way that you see the world? What challenges, what opportunities has that given you?
Well, it completely transformed my brain. I mean, I don't know what I would have been like if I hadn't learned Japanese, but I came to Japan and immediately turned 20. So when the age of 20, I teach college students around that age. And it's so easy to get to the point you're not quite an adult, but you think you are, and you think you got it all figured out and nobody can teach you, Well, right at that point, I get to this country where I can't even talk and I don't know any of the customs and I'm constantly being laughed at for funny things that I do. And you go back to being a baby. You have to learn everything over again. And then plus the language being so different. I mean, think about even breathing and body language. I found that they would be making sounds like, you're using the breath, and if you don't do that, and also something called aizuchi, which means if someone says something, you will make a sound to indicate that you're listening. Yeah, so this guy, you're constantly like talking at the same time, and if you don't do that, they wonder, are you listening? Mm-hmm. Even on the phone, you need to do this. So a totally different sense of communication and using different parts of the brain. And I must say, one of the biggest challenges, of course, is learning kanji, the Chinese characters. There are so many. I've got a wonderful poster here I'd like to show you. Well, first of all, you need about 2,000 kanji to be literate. And this is what it looks like. I'll show you up close so you can see,
Yeah.
They have a lot of strokes, and these are not individual words. They're more like Greek and Latin word roots. I can't get to the bottom of it.
It keeps going, William. It keeps going.
And this is just the minimum, And so, to learn these, you start with the basic ones, but you have to then learn the combinations of sounds or of characters, and then, so that was huge, right? And then there was even once you learn how to read them in printing, there's these scripts. Like each character is written in different scripts. There's the block script and the semi-cursive and the cursive. And so this, believe it or not, this character here and this character are the same.
Yeah.
It's just written how cursively it's written.
Yeah.
Right. So you have the cursive thing, and also this was one of the biggest discoveries I found. And if I can share my screen for a moment. The mistranslations, the misconceptions that we get by people who don't really understand kanji. me see if I've got this here. Okay. So, for example, what my advisor, my college professor, his advisor was Edwin Reischauer, who was a former ambassador to Japan. And I met Reischauer, and he told me a story way back in the early 70s that I never forgot. He said one of the things that he constantly found that he was embarrassed. People would say, "What is your shumi?" Which is usually translated as hobby, but it has a much deeper meaning. And he would say golf or something like that. And what the Japanese would then say, well, it's you're a fifth dan in kendo, or you study the game of Go. And these are lifelong studies that are much more than a shumi. And if you break down the word, the first character means to run and take, and then to taste or to put not yet in your mouth. So it's something that you're just constantly running after, and it actually develops your character.
Mm.
So this is a trans, and he didn't have any shumi, and so he always felt embarrassed by that. And there's another one that's the Book of Five Rings that was by Miyamoto Musashi. That was a bestseller in the 80s, right? And Miyamoto Musashi, he says over and over again, you must research this well, or you must investigate this well. And it almost sounds like poor literature because he just keeps saying the same thing. Then I realized when I looked at the original, it was just poor translation because the word he used was ginmi. And if you break down those characters, it means now in the mouth, and the meaning there is that you're reciting it, and then not yet in the mouth, meaning that you are imagining it. So his point was that you had to read aloud and absorb it over and over again until it became a part of you.
Mm. So you just referenced Musashi and the Gono Rosho. And so at the beginning, we talked about Aikido, we talked about Shodo. So, obviously there's this concept of the Do arts so will you explain what the Do arts, and then let's connect this again back to leadership so that, we can continue to build on that.
Yes. Okay. Well, Do is also pronounced Michi, and it means road, but it's a road as in a path, like a way of life, a way. And the character has two parts. One means to go, and the other means neck, as in risk your neck. In other words, it's you stick your neck out and commit yourself.
Mm.
And obviously, a road is a path that has been traveled, so it's something that you can travel and then return and then lead people along. So that's how I would relate, and they apply this to everything, flower arranging, whatever. If I could just comment briefly, though, to return to the language thing, just briefly, the other things that I find quite fascinating is body language. This is a dictionary of how many words, for example, in English, can you suggest that would use the word hand, or like manual or something, handbook? How many could you come up with?
I mean, maybe 5 to 10 if I'm lucky.
Maybe 5 to 10. And in Japanese, there's a few more that most people can come up with. There are over 800 expressions. It just goes on and on and on. And this is just hand. There's 35 pages in the dictionary just using hand. They have the same thing for eyes and ears, and almost everything they do in the language uses some part of the body to express what we would generally translate in psychological terms or functional terms. Like even big company is a big hand, right? Or a player is a selected hand. A hand is a strategic move, So I find that quite fascinating. And then you also have even a dictionary this thick on words related to rain. So the sensitivity to nature and to, just subtle changes. And then lastly, my favorite, they have these onomatopoeic words. And so you would express, and there's no kanji to go with these, so they're really hard to learn. Yeah. But for example, saba saba, how would you have any idea what that meant other than it means carefree, detached, fresh, neat, or feel relieved. Or jime jime, melancholy, depressed, dark, gloomy, damp. And they're just all repeated double sounds. It's like baby talk, Gata gata means complain or rattle or tremble.
Mm.
And you just have to learn them. And they use them in context. So everything's it's a high context language.
Yeah, the U.S. government actually categorizes the Japanese language as level 5.
Hmm.
Obviously the Romance languages, you're able to pick up different words depending on
Right,
which
right.
culture you're in, but nope, not with Japanese. You just got to get it.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, all right. So kind of shifting from language and just for me, for what I'm hearing when I relate to what you've been saying around leadership is that when you talk about the fact that there's 800 possible variations for hand,
Mm.
sometimes in leadership we sometimes think that there's only one way when
Ah, yeah, yeah.
when in actuality there's a myriad of ways, but we just have to be able to open our mind to be able to see that. So when I think about Namba walking and samurai walking, how would you say that this type of walking, obviously connected to the samurai culture, how does it relate to leadership? How are you using this today, in the modern age?
Mm, mm. Okay, well, if I may share my screen again, let's see. I go back. I actually wrote an article called Namba Walking Lessons in Leadership, which I'd like to share with our listeners today.
Okay. We will put
Uh,
that in the chat. Our producer will drop
please,
that in the chat.
please. Okay, so Namba walking versus modern walking, just to see so that you know the context. Um, Namba I also translate as samurai walking, and it was very typical of the way Japanese walked during the Edo period. You see the dates here, and it actually, in a way, came from. It was the only way you could walk wearing traditional Japanese clothing,
Mm.
which is rather tight fit, right? And if you twist your body a lot, it's going to come undone, right? So, and also they would walk on unpaved roads and mountain paths, walking everywhere. Sometimes maybe 30 miles a day would have been very common that people would walk. And I also fluid motion without forcing or twisting or disconnected movements because you had to be efficient. Otherwise, you just break down in fatigue.
Mm.
And it was compact motion with short strides and a low center and no arm swinging. And you lead from the back foot, stepping forward with feet parallel to the ground. This is all, if you look at a samurai movie, this is how they walk. Good posture, spatial awareness, and it's unhurried. So I used to say compared to Western walking, but now Japanese walk in this way too, the modern walking. And I think it was influenced a lot by Western clothing, which forgives twisting and forgives free movement. You wear a t-shirt and jeans, you can sit in whatever posture you want. It's not going to make your clothes come apart. And the shoes, the big thick-soled shoes will cushion the blow. So even if you're walking incorrectly, you won't know it. Twisting the upper body to gain power from torque, a lot of arm swinging, large strides. By the way, there's a proverb in Japanese that says, "Large stride, a person with a large stride has not mastered anything."
Mm.
So one characteristic of masters is they have a short stride. The heel strike and feet pushing off the ground, which is part of the big stride, and then forward leaning, looking down, and hurried. We recognize this a lot, the way people are always in a hurry.
Mhm.
So how does this relate to leadership? Well, I think it's so easy for us today to get into our head a lot. We get ideas. This is the way it should be, and you give directions from the head, but you don't take action, right? So one of the characteristics of samurai is that words must match actions. Actions must match words. Sounds like Shakespeare, but it was a samurai axiom, and that one of the best ways to make sure that you are taking action is to walk the floor. Go out and spend time with your people. See things from their point of view. Don't just sit behind a desk and give directives.
I think that's great. I mean, I've watched your videos on the walking, and for those who don't know, when you talk about the samaway, when you talk about hakama, which are the riding pants that are over that, when you watch William walk, it's really interesting because then when you take it on yourself, you suddenly are moving a lot faster, but you're taking less strides. And
Yeah.
for me to relate that to leadership is that the more that we become accountable for far more people around us. We have to be very precise about our time, our speaking, our actions. And so I think this then leads directly into calligraphy, because again, if you don't have a relationship with Japanese calligraphy, or you've never seen a master actually work the brush, you have a new book called Song of the Brush Dance, correct?
Yes, there's the ink. Yes.
So,
Um,
what's the story behind the book? And again, going deeper into Japanese calligraphy.
Yeah, okay. Actually, I've written quite a number of books, but only two on calligraphy. And this book I wrote 30 years ago, Shodo, the Art of Coordinating Mind, Body, and Brush. And that's what I looked like 30 years ago.
Okay, so you know what? This is not a joke. This is not a joke. This is happening in the moment. I have that book in my library, and
You do?
I did not connect it to you until in
Oh,
this moment. I literally have goosebumps. Not a joke. Like I can't even begin. I've never had this happen ever. Like
wow.
I'm surprised in some of the photos that I sent you of my office that
Yeah.
we didn't see that. But I'm stunned.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, so we've been connected for more than 30 years already. So
Absolutely.
this is the new book, the update. It's actually a completely different book, but Song of the Brush, Dance of the Ink, The Path to Self-Discovery Through Japanese Calligraphy.
Mm.
And there's one of the theme of the book, Song of the Brush, Dance of the Ink. This is a scroll that I painted that says that 30 years ago.
Mm. I'm looking at it. Very nice.
And then this is the one I did last year, which is, it's the same calligraphy,
Yeah.
but it's the same scroll, but a very different style of calligraphy.
Yeah, and so speak to that. So, obviously, as we refine, as we age, and with experience, like things change. Our handwriting changes, our
Yeah.
calligraphy changes. How do you equate that to a conversation of leadership or even mastery, for that matter?
Mm, mm, mm. Well, traditionally elders were respected, and even though they might have lost some features of youth, they would gain wisdom, hopefully. Nothing worse than getting older and not getting any wisdom, right? But I think, and the martial arts have suggested this to me, and I've experienced it, is that you don't have to get old in the traditional sense as you get older in years.
Mm.
In a couple of months, I turned 70, but I feel, as good or even better than when I was in my 30s. And I think part of it is martial arts training, but also walking. I walk a lot, of course, Namba walking, but I try to walk 6 to 8,000 steps a day.
Mm.
And if you don't walk, like if you're sitting down 8 hours a day, now think about it. You go to the office, you're at home, you're watching TV or something, you're eating dinner. It's so easy to sit for 8 hours.
Mm.
So easy. Even if you go to the gym for an hour, it doesn't take you out of the definition of a sedentary life. And that makes you much more predisposed to all kinds of illnesses, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, just, a long list of things that we would hope to avoid and that are preventable if you walk. And just walking that, it's an hour and 20 minutes maybe at most, but you don't have to do it all at once. But if you do that, you can actually maintain good blood circulation, youth. In fact, I don't know, the life insurance company, AXA, it's the largest life insurance company in the world. They actually have an app that tracks the number of steps you take. And if you walk 10,000 steps a day for, let's say, 125 days a year, they'll reduce your insurance premium from 5 to 10 to 20%.
Hmm.
Because they know, those guys study the numbers very, very seriously. They know if you walk like that, you're much less likely to get those diseases and less likely to die. It sounds like a winning proposition, right?
It
Well,
does.
then somebody comes along and there was this electronic swing. You put your phone in it and it counts the steps while you watch Netflix. I mean, oh my God. The things people will do to avoid walking.
Absolutely. Well, so we're halfway in, and I want to go to some of the questions that are already coming in.
Yeah.
So Gonzalo Salinas has asked, how can we integrate our natural aggression to
Mm,
lead a more spiritual life? I think this fits, especially with walking.
mm, 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 mm. Well, no, that's a great question, and you think about dogs, right? If you don't take your dog for a walk, they're going to build up all kinds of tension and aggression, and you just release it by walking. So I think even walking, back to Namba, is a great thing. And the other thing, aggression taken out on other people does not lead to good consequences, right? So what we do in the martial arts is you think that your real opponent is yourself, right? So you learn to overcome, to master yourself. You want to be better than you were yesterday, not necessarily just better than the other guy, because somebody else is going to come along and be better than you.
Mhm.
So you measure your progress by competing against yourself.
Okay, that's great. And I think another question that relates, and by the way, this is an opportunity for, if you have a question and you don't want to ask it yourself, go ahead and put it in the chat. And then my producer will get that to me so I can ask those. So Julian Wood, she asks, what are techniques beyond what you've already said that you use personally to disconnect and relax when you're feeling stressed?
Mm-hmm. That's of course, like anybody else, I experience stress, or there are certain situations that make you nervous, but particularly when I was younger. But I got asked that same question when I was on TV. It was right before we went on air, and the newscaster that I was sitting next to said, um, "When when do you get time off? When are you most relaxed?" And I said, "As soon as that light goes on air, I'm most relaxed." So I don't separate my performance time and my practice time. I practice as if I'm on air, and when I'm on air, it's like I'm practicing. But that took a long time to get that. So really, to answer the question more directly, I think breathing makes a huge difference. There's an old Indian story that says that the number of breaths you take in your life is fixed. So each person would be individual, but if you breathe rough, deep, shallow breathing, you use up your quota right away, right? And if you can lengthen your breath, you actually lengthen your life. So I think it's very important. Maybe there's all kinds of breathing exercises, but I think the easiest one to practice is just when you finish exhaling, then pause. Don't hold your breath, but pause for a count of 3. So I'll do a very short exhalation, but and then when you finish inhaling, don't hold it, but just let it continue. So just that alone will add 6 seconds to your breath.
Mm.
So the average number of breaths per minute, according to doctors, should be about 16 to 20, because that's what most people are. But to my thinking, that's almost to the point of a nervous breakdown. I mean, it should be far, far less.
Mm.
Maybe 3 or 4 if you're at rest. And if you're really trying to focus on lengthening your breath, maybe 2 breaths or even 1 per minute.
Mhm. So looking at the fact that we're talking about traditional mastery in the modern age, when you were talking about breathing, it had me thinking about some of the training that I've done with Navy SEALs and other groups when we talk about combat breathing. And so I'm shifting now to a conversation about the samurai, because there's great mystique about this tradition that was essentially 1,000 years, and then the last essentially 263 years, where you had one family that was keeping the peace, and and of course that's the Tokugawa. So in your journey in revealing information in samurai samurai documentaries, what are some of your experiences that again relate to leadership, relate to relaxation, connect all that?
Oh, it's been such an extraordinary journey. I mean, I went to Okinawa and studied with, well, I interviewed an 8th-degree black belt master, and he said during the training, and I'd never done karate, right? And so he taught me a routine that I then had to perform. It's quite a challenge, but he then said, we often study the sutras of karate. And I said, well, I didn't even know there were sutras. If there is such a book, I'd like to read them. He said, no, there's no book. The sutras are the kata, the forms.
Mm.
And by study, it means we practice them. I felt like it was it was a Karate Kid moment, I don't want to go back. So, and then we went to Kagoshima where the Satsuma samurai were, and they had a very unique way of, they take a tree trunk about that thick and they just plop it right, stand it right in the dojo. And they take a wooden branch really hard and you'd strike both sides and you could see it was like carved like an hourglass, where they'd carved it. And they would train to be able to do 30 strikes in one breath. And they do this at the top of their lungs. So if you're sitting on the other side of the stick, you feel like if that stick falls down, you're a dead man, because they're like, "Ah!" It's like, oh my God, 30 strikes in one breath. Yeah.
And by the way, if anybody was sleeping during the talk,
Now they're with
sleeping.
no
Wait,
longer.
wait, what happened? What happened?
Yeah. So I mean and so just to experience some of those things, and then you remember the old Kung Fu series. And one of my favorite scenes, one of my favorite scenes from there was when Master Khan calls the young Caine, he's 12 or 13, and he says, quickly as you can, snatch the pebble from my hand. And of course he can't, right? And then when you can take the pebble from my hand, it will be time for you to leave. So I actually do that exercise when I teach in the dojo. And I have a short clip, it's a couple of minutes long, if I could share that. Which I did a demonstration in our dojo at the university for Okinawan junior high school students who are interested eventually in coming to our college. So let me just share this video clip. Okay, here we go. Now there's another one. I see that many people just continue to enjoy it. Let me show you another variation that you can just watch this and practice later. But do you know what this? Do you know what this is? Goishi. Yes, it's a ghost stone. Okay. Now we're going to do another demonstration. Please remember this. I think you probably have a go set at home. Actually, you can use any small stone. That would also work. There's a famous story from a movie, a kung fu movie that was really popular in the 1970s. And the young monk, he's, I guess, maybe 11, 12, 13 or something, and he's a young monk in this Shorinji temple. Shorinji, you have a lot of Shorinryu, I think in Okinawa too. Anyway, he's in the temple and he goes to the master, and the master holds out his hand with the pebble. And he says, take the pebble from my hand. And young Caine tries to take it, and it's just closes it really quickly. So it's similar to this exercise, right? It's really similar idea. So of course he can't do it, it's too fast. And then he says, when you can take the pebble from my hand, it will be time for you to leave. So in other words, that means he has mastered Kung Fu, and he's become really good at it. So let's experiment with this. We've also not done this before. You want to try? Okay. Can you quickly introduce yourself? I have 2 assistants today.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ken, and I work at ICLA. So I'll be assisting Reed Sensei. So yeah, nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Ken. Okay. So first, I will hold it, and you try to take it from my hand, but don't have your hand ready. Don't be ready. Just here, like nickel punch. Okay. It's not easy, right? Because just you think about it. All I have to do is this. He has to make a big motion. Okay. Now the problem is not the motion. Have your hand open. Yeah. The problem is not the distance of the motion. The distance of my motion, because obviously he has a much shorter way to go. The problem is that I should not signal my motion. Okay. So I have the pebble. Caught you sleeping. He knows it's coming, but he can't stop it. But I want you to also experience this, right? Before you found it very difficult. So the part of the reason it's difficult is all the time he's thinking, I'm going to get that pebble. He's signaling what he's going to do next. Even in karate, you don't want to do that. Don't show them what you're going to do. You have to be very calm and ready, and mentally, I saw you practicing. So you don't have to do this, but mentally you can kind of take the weight off your feet. We say in Japanese, fumbaranai. Don't force, just stand with shizentai, natural. And don't signal. Don't even think I'm going to use my right hand or anything. Just be ready and calm, and then when you go, just go, okay? Don't even look at the pebble. Oh, okay, well, he knocked it out of my hand. That's almost as good. But he got there before I could close it. So the interesting thing, so let's try it again. That was pretty good, actually, okay? But don't make any movement. You have to be very, very calm. Mentally, you make this fast motion, mentally. Yeah, mentally. Don't signal. Don't do anything like this. Muda no ugoki issai shinai. Oh, he got it. See, he got it. First time to practice. Really good. Yeah, very good. So I think that's a very, it's similar to the tenugui takeaway. Very similar. Okay, yeah. It's a really interesting exercise. You know, the guy's doing it for the first time.
Yeah.
And we oftentimes when we're sitting, we're thinking of something else, right? We're look like we're standing there, but we're actually mentally we're not physically present, right? So to be just so calm, and then when you act, you act. When you're at rest, you're at rest. That's a really Zen concept. That's something that we work on in samurai arts a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's great, especially if we're connecting this back to leadership. When you talk about, you know, not signaling what you're going to do before you do it. You know, you're because if suddenly you see me doing something, then you have time to defend that, and it becomes a whole different conversation. So let's take that. I'm gonna go to a question real quick. I don't know who asked this because all I can see is iPhone. So whoever has the iPhone, which maybe all of us do, it says good morning. So they must be in Japan. Great talk. Could you comment on how to be a good mindful leader in a stressful situation on the work floor in a traditional art or craft workshop?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. How to be a good mindful leader in the workshop or through a workshop?
It just says on the work floor in a traditional art craft workshop. I think if we just take it like, you know, to be a good mindfulness leader from your perspective, you know, in the work environment, how would you, you know, speak to that?
Well, I am fortunate to know a number of executives who are of very well-known international companies, and they almost all tell me, and some of them are actually martial arts friends, like Jerome Shishan is a president of Godiva Chocolates. He's just become world president. He's also a Kyudo master, and he, you know, they all struggle to find the time to recenter themselves through some form of training. And again, I think the ones who are successful have a do or a path that they can train themselves with. And the ones who are still struggling with it try to do it through a hobby. Oh, I'm just going to go, you know, listen to music, or I'll play golf or something. And nothing wrong with those things, but it doesn't really, they don't have time to do it anyway. And so when you're constantly being taken off center because of your work demands, it's difficult to be a good example. I mean, John, maybe you remember when you were a kid, there's certain adults that you sort of admire. You just respect them, just the way they are, their way of being. It might be a teacher or hopefully a parent. And there are others who they're scary, right? You don't want to be around them. And I think that leaders need to have that sense of self-possession. And where does it come from? It comes from training, and not necessarily just all work. It's something you can bring to work, but I think it's easier if you follow a discipline that can give you that sense.
Yeah, and what was interesting about what you said about that executive was that you said he studied Kyudo, which is Japanese archery. Yeah. And so what I think is interesting about, I mean, we could go deep into Eugene Herrigel and we could talk about his concepts of that, but let's connect this back to you because we've got about 15 minutes remaining. And by the way, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We will get to those, I promise. So if we take again, Kyudo, Aikido, Iaido, you know, what attracted you to Aikido, Iaido, mastery of the sword. And again, if we can, weave that leadership through there.
Yeah, okay. Actually, having mentioned Jerome, I should also say that he wrote a book called Target, which was about his experience of applying Kyudo philosophy to business. And he was actually able to triple their profits over a period of 5 years. Triple. And when he says it's real. I can say, yeah, you can apply this to business. Well, what have you done with it, right? But he's actually done it. And so I think there's a lot there. But one thing I have done, though, is analyze the process of mastery. So again, if I try to share my screen. Okay. Yeah, I made a matrix that that describes the process of mastery. Okay, here we go. Okay, so oftentimes in martial arts we talk about mind, skill, and body. This is the vertical axis. And then there's also shallow learning and deep learning, which I made as the horizontal axis, but you have to pass through skill. So in the upper left, it's all a mystery. It's all about discovery. It's a lot of fun, but it's shallow and it's all basically mental. And then as you learn, as you get into it more, you gain experience, but it's still pretty much cerebral. If you really want to make it a part of your body, to learn with your body, you have to pass through the skill center. So you go to the lower left, which means you're engaged in the practice. And then as you engage over time, you develop the ability of mastery. And this shows in your performance. So deep learning is what we're aiming for, but it takes time.
So when you talk about learning, so first of all, that was great. I really appreciate that you've brought all these extra imagery for us to review and look at. And again, for those who haven't spent much time with William, I'm telling you right now, like just a 30-minute conversation with him, it's amazing. And that's why, for me, one of the things that I love about you becoming a genie here at GenieCast is that you're now available to audiences around the world. So if you just wanted to take mindfulness, if you just wanted to take leadership and mindfulness, connect all this. It's such an incredible conversation to have, especially outside of Japan, because it's not the way the rest of the world thinks, and obviously how we think creates our reality. So let's shift to here in the last few minutes. So you're obviously a professor of a liberal arts college, in Japan. What's your experience been like? What have you noticed as a Caucasian in Japan who's fluent? Speak about some of those experiences.
Thank you. Well, it's very easy for people to say, "Oh, well, that's different. You've been doing it for 50 years. Oh, you had great teaching, and your situation is different." So, and in fact, I'm now entering my 8th year as a professor at the International College of Liberal Arts. You can put that into the chat, the link of that. But I now measure my mastery not by what I produce, but what my students produce. And I've got an awesome slide to show you on this. This is taking this process. This is a student from Finland. Now, most Japanese look at this as, wow, she must have been doing calligraphy for a long time. No, only 8 weeks, meeting twice a week. And I was stunned when I saw how good this was. It made me feel good because I thought, this works, right? And then there was another girl from Russia who participated entirely on Zoom. She did everything. She couldn't even get materials at first. And if you look, it's just exquisite calligraphy. People look at this. Oh, she must be like a Nidan at least. How could she do this entirely on Zoom? And I'm so proud of them for being able to do this. But it also let me know that you can take somebody who has no experience with the language, no experience with the brush, and you can bring them to that level in, say, 20 to 30 hours, which is not that much time, 2 to 3 months.
So yeah, William, you just said something to me that's really interesting. When I've heard people say, "Oh, well, you really can't make the same kind of difference virtually than you can in person." And what I love about what you just demonstrated is, I've looked at Japanese and Chinese calligraphy for most of my life, and this is gorgeous. I mean, it's got soul, it has body, it has depth, it has all of that. And again, how many weeks was this?
Well, it's a 3 month semester, so she did this within 3 months
Over Zoom.
over Zoom. I don't even know what she looks like because she's got her video off, right? But I'm hoping that the visa thing will open up and she'll be able to come. But this is just awesome. I mean, and she's really, I admit, she's the best. But there are others that are similar level. So what I've come to there's a great phrase, sotaku doji, and what it describes is a bird, like a little chicken, inside the shell, is not strong enough to peck its way out. It's trying, and the mother bird hears that and pecks back at the same place. So sotaku means to pecking, and doji means simultaneous or pecking with perfect timing, and that's the safe way to break the shell and enable the bird to come out free and learn to fly on its own. So this is how I try to teach. I see where my students are pecking, and I try to peck back at the same, because I teach students from over 40 countries, and I teach everything in English.
Mm.
So this has been a marvelous experience for me to do that.
So when you were talking about the pecking, I was thinking about the research that I did on my 2020 book, where I was talking about the experience of Charles Parsons, who was an American banker who started the American Bankers Association, and he gets to Japan in 1894, his second trip, and he starts talking about Tokugawa and talking about how they were tycoons as they would call them. And so kind of pecking, we've been talking about samurai and leadership the whole time, kind of looking at our time that's remaining. I'd like you to peck specifically on samurai and leadership today, so we can connect the past to the present.
Okay, well, and different people will have different takes on samurai culture, but to me, samurai culture is really, it goes back to this Zen and Japanese culture. That's really what it's about, and the demonstration of mastery through these various arts. And I think of samurai culture as the art of practical wisdom. I mean, something like I don't know if you can see it. It's in the back. There's a calligraphy on the wall there.
Yeah.
That it means makoto. It's a phrase that is used a lot by the samurai, and the character on the left, the radical, means words or speech, and on the right means to become. So words must become actions. So you must you make a promise, you keep it. You commit, right? And there's a whole thing about Bushido. I mean, in fact, there's a book written 120 years ago by Nitobe Inazo called Bushido, the Soul of Japan. And it was things like respect and justice and sincerity. And, there's like 7 principles that he gave. And these became essentially the Boy Scout oath. It had a huge influence on the Boy Scouts. And then when they make the merit badges, those were the family crests, the symbol, the round symbol. And Theodore Roosevelt was influenced by that book, John F. Kennedy, a huge influence, because it was about correct behavior, being strong, but also being good.
When you mentioned Makoto, the translation that I had heard, and please correct me if it's incorrect, is sincerity of heart.
Yeah.
Well,
sincerity would be related to that you're, I mean, I gave you the breakdown of the kanji, but yeah, sincerity means that authenticity is another way to translate it, maybe.
I love that. I mean, that for me, that's one of the things I think is interesting, especially when you begin to understand kanji or the Japanese language, especially with leadership, is that, again, there are a myriad of ways that you can interpret these things in a positive manner. Like, I'm thinking about the Tao, and I'm thinking about the quote that says, what is a good man but a bad man's teacher? What is a bad man but a good man's job? If you don't understand this, you'll get lost however intelligent you are. It is the great secret. What do you think about that quote?
Could you give it to me again?
What is a good man but a bad man's teacher? What is a bad man but a good man's job? If you don't understand this, you will get lost. However intelligent you are, it is the great secret.
Oh, okay. Actually, that reminds me of an old Chinese story where there was a man who he gave up all of his fortune and he traveled across mountains and through dangerous things to meet this great Chinese master. And he says, "Master, I've traveled all these ways. I've given up everything. Please show me the truth of life." And what he said was, "Do good, do not do evil." He says, I've traveled all this way to do that. Everybody knows that. He says, "Everybody knows it, but nobody practices it." So can you actually do what you say?
Yeah. Yeah. It's very difficult for many people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so looking that we've got about 3 minutes remaining,
Mm.
William, again, here as a genie here on the GenieCast platform, you have now access to the entire world. Like companies, schools, et cetera, can really tap in to your knowledge base and the positive difference that you make for others. What would you like to leave us with today that gives us a further sense of you and your
Mm.
commitments in life?
You know what? My dream, actually, because I'm in my 8th year and actually, in a sense, getting ready for retirement. I'm not going to retire ever, but age-wise, I'm nearing retirement. But over the last 8 years, I've been able to develop a really, really good curriculum designed in English for students from over 40 countries. I
Mm.
teach students from Zambia and Uzbekistan and Taiwan and Thailand and all over the world. And I teach a semester course. Well, what I'd really like to do is take the essence of those kind of in modular form and make it available to lifelong learners, to people who want to study mindfulness at a deeper level, not just the idea of just focus on your breathing, but to take practical wisdom and make it available by drawing on what I've learned over the last 8 years teaching.
I think that's fantastic. So, uh, before I take us to the end, I want to let you know, William, that I am stunned that your original book on Japanese calligraphy has
It's
been
on
in,
yourself.
it's on my shelf, but it has been in my hands since 1991.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was given to me as a gift. And it was interesting. There were a couple times in the course of my life where I was like, okay, yeah, I should just keep holding on to this.
Mm.
And when you showed the cover of the book about 45, I was like, how did I it's
Yeah.
I guess my point for this is that realizing that we sometimes miss what's
Mm.
right in front of us. I've shared with you over email that true mastery is often very subtle and it is missed by so many.
Mm, mm,
Will
mm.
you speak a little bit to that about quote unquote true mastery?
Yeah. Okay. Well, true mastery. Well, my father, when I'd been doing Aikido for about 10 years, and I'm now in my 50th year, he asked me, when haven't you graduated from that Aikido yet? So I thought, okay, I'm going to teach my dad a lesson. I said, well, thanks to Do, there is no graduation. It's a lifelong path. I thought, I told him some good stuff. He paused a moment and said, are you sure you're not being taken advantage of? I wondered what he'd say now. 50 years later, I'm still doing it, right? But it's a different way of thinking. Instead of a linear progression, like in a college, 4 years and you graduate and you're done, you do something else. It's a seasonal thing. You go round and round and round. And it's not back to the same place, but you back through the same processes. But when you come back to the winter season the second time, you're a different person, and the third time. So you become what we call seasoned, which means masterful.
Love it. William Reed, thank you so much for joining us. Don't go away yet. I'm going to begin to
Do you
take
have
us
a
to the end.
Q&A as well? Or
So this is for everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's Smart Talk, Traditional Mastery in the Modern Age with William Reed. As a genie on the GenieCast platform, you can book William for a two-way dialogue with your teams or clients anywhere in the world. Learn more at geniecast.com or simply reach out to me on LinkedIn. Smart Talks are powered by GenieCast with support from the Nitrous Effect and the Emerson Leadership Institute in the Shape It School of Business at St. Louis University, where there is a commitment for higher purpose, greater good. And I think this totally embodies today's conversation through the focus of where mission meets the market. William, thank you
Yeah.
again.
Thank you, John. I want to make sure that everyone gets a copy of my article, Namba Walking Lessons in Leadership, because that addresses many of the questions you asked. And I think the PDF is available if you can make it available in the chat or.
Yep, in the chat, and if for example you get disconnected, you can always reach out to William on LinkedIn for a copy of that. So my name is John Lanius, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining us, whether you're in the States or in Japan, and we'll see you on our next Smart Talk powered by GenieCast. We wish you well.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.